Morning, folks. Welcome back to Three Zen. Bobo here. So this morning I want to begin by talking a little bit about a subject that's very, very dear to my heart, that of military brats. And I'm going to base my presentation here, once I get this thing oriented correctly, on Mary Edwards Worsh's book, Military Brats, Legacies of Childhood Inside the Fortress. I first read this book in the mid 90s, and boy, did it resonate with me. Then in 2009, I picked it up again and read it again, and I really focused on the introduction by Pat Conroy, and that's what this discussion is going to be here this morning. I will expand it in follow-on presentations here in the near future, but for this morning I want to give you an introduction and a sense of what it was like being a military brat, at least in the 50s and 60s. I think brats today, they're no different than what we were back in those days, but they don't face the same stresses that we did. They have other stresses in their life, and I'll address those in a subsequent presentation. But be that as it may, brats tend to be the same, whether they be Air Force brats, Army brats, Navy brats, Coast Guard brats, and or Marine brats. There's something we all understand about each other, and we tend to bond immediately. And that bond is something that is so dear. If you've ever experienced it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The focus of this presentation is, first of all, to highlight it to folks that haven't lent much thought to what it was like growing up as a military brat, either as a brat yourself perhaps, or as a parent of a military child. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into what that was like. And before I go any further, I want to acknowledge the fact that not everybody is in love with the term military brat. And I get that. Yeah, some people find it offensive to be called a brat. Well, get over it. And if you do find it offensive, then hit the jettison button and go make a key lime pie or change a tire or something like that and leave us alone. Okay, that being said, I'm going to delve right in here to the introduction. So, first thing Pat says that caught my eye is, I think being a military brat is one of the strangest and most interesting ways to spend an American childhood. Boy, I will echo that thought. I saw things that when I tell other people, they just stand there with their mouths open sometimes. I watched B-29s operating out of Kadena. I watched B-47s taken off out of Tucson, Davis-Monthan. And boy, those things were oil burners. Oh my God, they were. And then I saw B-36s flying out of Puerto Rico, and then the arrival of B-52 jet bombers. I also saw the first U-2s operating out of Ramey. And in Chambly, France, we played in pillboxes left over by the Germans. They didn't need them anymore, so we made them into tree forts underground. And then in Wiesbaden, I experienced the magic of German Christmas. Oh my God, those were such magical times to spend Christmas in Germany. But I'll get into some of these other things here a little later on in this thread. For now, we'll come back to what it was like being a military brat. He goes on to say, we are an undiscovered nation living invisibly in the body politic of this country. There's no way you can identify a military brat. More often than not, when you see one of us, you wouldn't know that individual's a military brat until you started talking with them or you were told. There's just no way you can tell. And he says, we have no special markings or passwords to identify each other when we move into a common field of vision. We grew up as strangers to ourselves. Boy, there's a great deal of truth in that. Then he talks about the sacrifices that military kids make for the careers of their parents. And there are sacrifices. I mean, we moved every 2 or 3 years, so just about the time I was ready to set down roots, we got jerked up and sent on our way. I never lent a lot of thought to it until later years in life because that was my normal. Doesn't everybody move within 2 years? Between years 2 and 3, you start packing because you know you're going somewhere. You don't know where, but you know you're going to be going somewhere soon. He says, we'd never stop to honor ourselves out loud for our understanding service to America. And that leads him into, no one ever gave us our ticket to the homeland until Mary Edwards Worse wrote this book. He says, my job was to be a stranger, to know no one's name on that first day of school, to be ignorant of all the history and flow and that familial sense of relationship and proportion that makes a town safe for a child. Home is a foreign word in my vocabulary and always will be. He then delves into what it was like growing up a little bit inside his house with the great Santini. And I'll leave that for you to explore yourself if you choose to. He says, military life marked me as one of its own. Even as a child, it marked me as one of its own. I'm accustomed to order, to a chain of command, to a list of rules at poolside, a spit-shine guard at the gate, retreat at sunset, reveille at dawn, and everyone in my world must be on time. Being late was unimaginable in the world I grew up in. So I always arrive at appointments early, and I find it difficult to tolerate lateness in others. I always know what time it is when I don't carry a watch. Boy, that's true too. He goes on, and the great family of military brats has had no voice because we've assimilated so well into the slipstreams of America. That goes back to what I just said. This is my paradox. Because of the military life, I'm a stranger everywhere and a stranger nowhere. I can engage anyone in conversation, become well liked in a matter of seconds, yet there's always a distance I can never recover, a slight shiver of alienation, of not belonging, and an eye on the nearest door. The word goodbye will always be a killing thing to me, but so is the word hello. Man, I can relate to the elements of this paragraph, that sense of not belonging. It's nuts, it's crazy, but it's always been within me. And to a certain degree, still resides within me. Yet I can walk away from my best friends and rarely think of them again. Now here's where I differentiate from Pat. I could tell you about friends I made in Remy, Puerto Rico, in Chambly, France, and in Wiesbaden. Some of them I don't hear from, and that can trouble me. Each year I began my life over again. I grew up knowing no one well, least of all myself, and I think it damaged me. I grew up not knowing if I was smart or stupid, handsome or ugly, interesting or insipid. I was too busy reacting to the changing landscapes and climates of my life to get any clear picture of myself. I was always leaving behind what I was just about ready to become. I could never catch up to the boy I might have been if I had grown up in one place. That's true. And he goes back to his relationship with his father here. But when he comes to the summary, this I found very, very interesting, and boy, did it strike a chord with me. He's talking about being a novelist. The novelist kept trying to change Mary's book and make something it wasn't. I imagined that all of us could meet on some impeccably manicured field, all military brats, in a gathering so vast it would be like the assembly of some vivid and undaunted army. We could come together on this parade ground at dusk, million voiced and articulating our secret anthems of hurt and joy. We could praise each other in voices that understand both the magnificence and pain of our transient life. Our greatest tragedy is that we don't know each other. Our stories could help us see and understand what it is we have all lived through and endured. At the end of our assembly, we could pass in review in a parade of unutterably beauty. As brats, we've watched 1,000 parades on 1,000 weekends. We've shined shoes and polished brass and gotten every bedroom we've ever slept in ready for Saturday morning inspections. A parade would be a piece of cake for the military brats of the world. I would put our mothers and fathers in the reviewing stand and require that they come in full dress uniform and in the prime of their life. I want our mothers and fathers handsome and strong and feared by the armies of the world the day they attend our parade. To the ancient beat of drums, we could pass by those erect and salient rows of mothers and fathers. What a fearful word the word father is to many of us. Now, there's where Pat interjects his relationship with his father. But not on this day, when the marchers keep perfect step and the command for "Eyes right" roars through our disciplined ranks, and we turn to face our mothers and fathers in that crowd of warriors. In this parade, these men would understand the nature and value of their children's sacrifice for the first time. Our mothers and fathers would stand at rigid attention. Then they would begin to salute us one by one. And in that salute, that one sign of recognition, of acknowledgement, they would thank us for the first time. They would be thanking their own children for their fortitude and courage and generosity and long suffering for enduring a military childhood. He sums this up by saying, Mary points out in this splendid book something that's never been pointed out before, that military brats, my lost tribe, spent their entire youth in the service of this country, and no one knew we were there. Boy, that struck a chord to me. No one knew we were there. I read that again in 2009, as I mentioned earlier. And as I read that, I sat there in my chair alone, and tears just started rolling out of my eyes. No one even knew we were there. And I thought to myself, why the hell not? Why not? So I began to think about what is the appropriate way to recognize the service of these kids, of our kids, of us. What would be appropriate? And it dawned on me that perhaps some form of recognition from the Congress might be in order. So I wrote an email to my congressman, Bob Latta at the time, who's still in Congress, by the way, and I suggested he take a look at introducing a bill to recognize and honor the service of military children. I knew that putting brats in that probably would kill it before it ever got started. So yeah, I sold myself out. Okay. Anyway, I sent that email off to him, and within 45 minutes, I got a reply that essentially said, tell me more about your idea. And I'll tell you the story about how that legislation went in a subsequent presentation here over the next couple of days. Because I think it's an interesting story, and I do want to preserve it. But suffice to say, if you have kids that are military brats, give them a call today and tell them, thank you. Thank you for putting up with perhaps what you had to or what you did for me to have a career. If you have that opportunity, give them a hug. I sit here and, to be very candid, I put my Air Force career ahead of my kids. And it was through this initiative that I took in 2009 that helped me make an amends to them by recognizing them for their sacrifices when I dragged them virtually all over the world myself. Although we didn't move as much when I was on active duty as I did when I was a kid. It still it still puts stresses on kids more than what they would have if they grew up in one area. And likewise, if you are in a component of the military service where you don't move around as much per se, take a moment, grab your kids, give them a hug, and just say, hey, thanks for being my kid, and thanks for being part of this military family, you little brat. It's a term of endearment. It really is. And with that, aside from my basic sign off, I want to salute every military brat we have out there watching this. So, with that, thanks for your service. This is Bobo. Base gear. Stop.